The system isn't broken. It's a masterpiece of elegant dependence, perfectly designed to keep you comfortable, compliant, and caffeinated, right up until the moment the music stops. It's a Thursday in mid-May. You're sitting in your favorite coffee shop, the kind with exposed brick and overpriced latties that cost more than a share of some penny stocks. You're watching the world rush by outside the window. A blur of commuters, couriers, and tourists, all of them moving with a quiet confidence that the grid will always be up. You pull out your phone, tap the screen, and see a number. That number represents your wealth. It's clean, it's digital. It's a flickering pixel on a glass screen that tells you that you are safe. But let's be honest for a second. Have you ever truly contemplated the visceral, stomach-turning powerlessness of having money in a bank that you simply cannot touch? Not because you forgot your password, but because the institution itself decided that your money isn't really yours today. Psychologists call this normalcy bias. It's that mental state where we underestimate the possibility of a disaster simply because it hasn't happened lately. We assume that because the ATM worked yesterday, it will work tomorrow. We assume that because the internet is fast, the social contract is intact. But we are essentially domesticating our own existential dread. We want to believe that the central banks are run by omniscient deities who have mastered the economy, keeping the chaos at bay with nothing but a few spreadsheets and a lot of confidence. History, that cold, unblinking witness, suggests otherwise. History tells us that when the gears of the machine finally seize, no one cares about your LinkedIn title, your credit score, or how many followers you have on your curated feed. They care about the primitive basics. Can I withdraw my cash? Can I eat? Can I keep the roof over my head? In a crisis, survival isn't about being a visionary investor or timing the market perfectly. It's about being antifragile. It's about being the kind of person who is incredibly difficult to kill, economically speaking. Let's travel back to 1933. Imagine you are a hard-working person who has done everything right. You saved. You trusted the institution on the corner with the marble pillars. But before the FDIC started tucking us into bed with the illusion of government-insured safety, families learned a bloody, unvarnished lesson. Money in a failing bank is just a ledger entry on a sinking ship. During the Great Depression, when banks began to fold like cheap suits, wealth became a useless scrap of paper overnight. This wasn't an abstract economic theory. It was a physical reality. People stood in line for hours, blocks and blocks of desperate faces, only to watch a closed sign get taped to the glass. This is what we call counterparty risk. If your survival requires someone else to keep a promise they can no longer afford to keep, you aren't wealthy. You're just a creditor in a line that has no end. The families who made it through 1933 weren't necessarily the ones with the largest balance sheets on paper. They were the ones with physical cash under their mattresses or tangible assets that didn't require a bank's permission to exist. They understood that in a true crisis, liquidity isn't a luxury. It's the difference between a meal and a hunger pang. Then there is hyperinflation, the silent predator of the middle class. We look at Weimar Germany in 1922 and 1923, and it looks like a performance art piece in economic entropy. Prices didn't just rise, they exploded, increasing by 700% in a matter of months. By the end of 1923, people were literally taking wheelbarrows of cash to the bakery just to buy a single stale loaf of bread. Imagine the psychological trauma of receiving your paycheck at 9 a.m. and realizing that if you don't spend it by noon, you've effectively worked the entire morning for free. In that world, savings are no longer a safety net. They are fuel for the fireplace. Your life savings, the result of 30 years of sweat, blood, and missed vacations, can evaporate in the time it takes to brew a pot of coffee. The only people who didn't drown in the German hyperinflation were those holding intrinsic value. They held land that could produce food. They held fuel, or they held foreign currency. They didn't hold money in the way we think of it today. They held things that people physically could not stop using. As Arthur Schopenhauer once remarked, money is human happiness in the abstract. Therefore, he who is no longer capable of enjoying happiness in the concrete devotes himself utterly to money. In 1923, the abstract became a joke, and only the concrete remained. But what happens when digital money stops completely? Look at Argentina in 2001. When the government froze every bank account, the infamous Corralito. The social contract didn't just bend, it shattered into a million pieces. When you can't trust the state and you can't trust the algorithm, you return to the oldest economy in human existence, your neighbor. Ordinary people, doctors, lawyers, and teachers, started creating barter clubs. They traded a haircut for a bag of flour. They traded a car repair for a dozen eggs. The economy became primitive, but it became real again. In this environment, your PhD in derivatives meant absolutely nothing. Your ability to bake bread, fix a pipe, or transport goods meant everything. The crisis stripped away the fake wealth and rewarded the real skills. It was a brutal reminder that a society is only as strong as its local connections. When the macroeconomy fails, the microeconomy of the street is all that's left. Fast forward to today. As Robert Kiyosaki recently pointed out, we are currently being entertained by 162 declassified UFO files while our private credit debt hits a record 9.2%, the highest level in history. We are arguing about the extraordinary to avoid looking at the urgent. The Pentagon releases reports about glowing orbs and infrared footage, and the internet goes into a frenzy. It's brilliant, really. Propaganda isn't about hiding everything. It's about choosing what you get to see. They show you 162 files out of millions, drawing a boundary for public discussion. It's like a public company highlighting its record growth on page 1 while burying its toxic debt in a footnote on page 47. While the crowd is looking up at the sky, the real unidentified phenomena are happening on the ground. Crude oil is sitting at $120, gas has hit $4.60, and over 1,000 tech workers lost their jobs in a single day. 80 million baby boomers are approaching retirement with 401 NA, plans that are more vulnerable than ever. And let's not forget the Federal Reserve facing a massive leadership shift on May 15th that could redefine the global dollar. The rich don't watch UFO news. They watch the Fed. They watch the flow of oil. They watch the movement of gold. They know that your attention is your most valuable financial asset. If they control where you look, they control what you miss. So, how do we find a calm sort of optimism in this mess? How do we stop being rich dad's version of the poor dad? The person who spends their whole life looking at whatever the news tells them to look at. You start by building a personal safety net that doesn't rely on the cloud. First, you have to sever the chains of debt immediately. In a sunny, expanding economy, debt is a tool. In a storm, it's an anchor that drags you to the bottom. The people who survived the Great Depression weren't always the ones with the most cash. They were the ones who owed the least. If you have fixed payments in a world of disappearing income, you are a hostage. Next, you need to accumulate assets with intrinsic value, things you can actually touch. Digital numbers on a screen can be deleted or frozen, but gold, silver, a plot of land, or a pantry full of food, those have value that no central bank can print away. Third, you invest in what I call skill currency. If the system resets, your fancy job title won't buy you an egg. You need skills that people will always need. Can you fix an engine, grow a garden, or heal a wound? These are the real currencies of a crisis. And finally, you foster your tribe. When the big institutions fail, the person across the street becomes your most important ally. A strong community network is the only insurance policy that actually pays out when the world stops turning. Go home today and look in your wallet. Do you have enough physical cash to survive for 30 days if the internet went dark tonight? If the answer is no, you are 100% dependent on a system that doesn't even know your name. The rich don't watch UFO movies today. They watch the money. They ensure they aren't the ones standing in line when the doors lock. Don't sleep on your faith in the system. Be grounded, be prepared, and be antifragile. Because the most extraordinary thing about the future won't be what's in the sky. It will be how you protected the ground you stand on.